When we read the book of Genesis, our attention is often drawn to the towering figures whose names dominate the pages. Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Their stories are expansive, filled with dialogue, drama, and clear turning points. Yet surrounding these familiar names is a quiet crowd of others. They appear briefly, sometimes in a single verse, sometimes only as part of a genealogy. Their stories are not fully told, yet they are not accidental. Scripture does not waste words. Every name that appears carries weight, memory, and meaning. What if these lesser-known figures are not marginal at all, but essential? What if their brief mentions are windows into the early shaping of humanity, culture, morality, and the unfolding purposes of God? And what if their presence speaks to us precisely because they are easy to overlook? This is Bible Scope, your place to find light, find truth, and find purpose. That if this journey speaks to your heart, like the video and subscribe to walk through Scripture with us. As we move slowly through the early chapters of Genesis, we are invited to read attentively, not only for what is emphasized, but for what is quietly included. Genesis is not merely a collection of heroic biographies. It is a foundational narrative about humanity itself, about beginnings, about choices, about how lives, even briefly mentioned ones, ripple outward into history. The genealogies of Genesis are often the first places readers rush through. Lists of names can feel distant, repetitive, or difficult to connect with. Yet in the ancient world, genealogies were never filler. They were carefully shaped literary structures. They preserved memory, identity, and moral meaning. To include a name was to acknowledge a life that mattered within the unfolding story. Consider the lineage of Cain in Genesis chapter 4. After the expulsion from Eden, Scripture follows two lines of descent. One through Cain, marked by increasing distance from God. Another through Seth, marked by the continuation of calling upon the name of the Lord. Both lines are described, not to glorify one and erase the other, but to show the complexity of human development. Within Cain's lineage, we encounter figures whose influence on civilization is undeniable, even though Scripture gives them little narrative space. Jabal is described as the father of those who dwell in tents and raise livestock. Jubal is named as the father of those who play the lyre and pipe. Tubal-Cain is introduced as the forger of instruments of bronze and iron. And then there is Naamah, his sister, mentioned only once, without explanation. These names represent the birth of culture, pastoral life, music, technology, artistry, innovation. Scripture acknowledges these developments without condemnation or praise. They are simply presented as part of humanity's unfolding potential. This is important. The Bible does not portray early human progress as inherently evil or inherently redemptive. It is morally complex, shaped by the hearts of those who wield it. Tubal-Cain, in particular, stands at a critical intersection. As a metalworker, he represents a turning point in human history. Tools can cultivate land, build shelter, and support life. They can also become weapons. Genesis does not tell us how Tubal-Cain's creations were used. It leaves the question open, allowing readers to reflect on how human creativity can be directed toward either flourishing or destruction. Naamah's presence, though brief, is striking. In a genealogy dominated by men and occupations, her name appears alone, without explanation. Ancient Jewish interpreters noticed this and wondered why. Some traditions associated her with beauty or influence. Others connected her to later developments in culture or even spiritual decline. Scripture itself remains silent, and that silence is instructive. Not every influence is traced. Not every impact is recorded. Some lives shape the world quietly, in ways history cannot fully capture. Then there is Lamech, a figure whose few recorded words carry heavy moral weight. He is the first man in Scripture described as taking 2 wives, marking a departure from the earlier pattern of one man and one woman. His speech, preserved in poetic form, reveals a heart shaped by violence and pride. He boasts of killing a man for wounding him and declares that if Cain was avenged sevenfold, Lamech will be avenged 77-fold. This is not incidental. Lamech's words show how sin, left unchecked, escalates. Violence becomes something to celebrate rather than grieve. Justice becomes vengeance. Power becomes self-glorification. Through one short speech, Scripture reveals the trajectory of a society drifting further from God's original intention. What does this reveal about humanity? It shows how quickly patterns can shift, how innovations in culture and technology can coexist with moral decay, how progress in one area does not guarantee growth in wisdom or compassion. Genesis presents these developments honestly without simplifying the story. At the same time, Scripture does not allow Cain's line to dominate the narrative. Alongside it, another lineage unfolds. After Abel's death, Seth is born. His line is traced carefully, leading to figures like Enosh, during whose time people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Here again, the text is brief, but the implication is profound. In a world marked by violence and innovation, there remains a thread of worship, humility, and remembrance of God. Even here, many names pass by quietly. Mahalalel, Jared, Methuselah, names often remembered only for their longevity, yet each represents generations of faithfulness, struggle, and ordinary life. Genesis does not record their achievements, but their inclusion affirms that a life lived in quiet continuity with God is worthy of remembrance. As we move forward toward the flood narrative, another overlooked group appears: the sons of God and the daughters of men. Interpretations of this passage have varied across history. Some see angelic beings. Others see powerful human rulers. Still others understand these as intermarriages between godly and ungodly lines. Scripture does not fully explain, and responsible reading acknowledges this ambiguity. What is clear is the result. The earth becomes filled with violence, and human thoughts are continually bent toward evil. Within this context, Noah stands out not as a perfect man, but as one who walked with God. Yet even here, the text briefly names others: Noah's wife, his sons' wives. Their lives are not detailed, but without them, the story of preservation would not exist. Salvation in Genesis is communal, not individualistic. God's work unfolds through families, relationships, and shared obedience. After the flood, genealogies return. Once again, names accumulate quickly. Nations are formed. Languages diversify. Cultures spread. The Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10 is one of the most overlooked sections of Scripture, yet it offers a theological vision of humanity's shared origin. Every nation, every people group is traced back to a single family. Division emerges, but common humanity remains. Within this list, some names are familiar only because they later become nations or regions. Others fade entirely from memory. Yet Scripture preserves them as a reminder that God's concern extends beyond a single chosen line. He is the God of all the earth, even as He works through particular covenants. When we reach the Tower of Babel, the focus narrows again. Human ambition, technological capability, and collective pride converge. The builders are unnamed. They are defined not by individual identity, but by shared intention. They seek to make a name for themselves, to secure unity without dependence on God. The scattering that follows is not merely punishment. It is restraint. God limits human consolidation to prevent greater harm. Even judgment here carries mercy. Then, quietly, the narrative shifts again. A genealogy leads us from Shem to Abram. Names pass by quickly, but they form a bridge. Terah, Abram's father, is one such overlooked figure. He begins a journey toward Canaan, but stops in Haran, where he dies. Scripture does not explain why the journey halted. Yet Terah's partial obedience sets the stage for Abram's full call. Sometimes, what one generation begins, another must complete. Throughout Genesis, we see this pattern repeated. Lives intersect, decisions ripple forward. Briefly mentioned figures shape context, opportunity, and consequence. The story of Scripture is not driven only by the famous. It is built upon countless lives whose faithfulness, failure, creativity, or compromise contribute to the whole. What does this reveal about God? It reveals a God who sees every life, not only the ones history highlights. A God who works through families, cultures, and generations. A God who weaves meaning even through human ambiguity. Scripture does not sanitize the past. It records innovation alongside violence, worship alongside pride, obedience alongside hesitation. God remains present through all of it. What does this reveal about us? It challenges our assumptions about significance. We often measure impact by visibility. Genesis suggests otherwise. A name listed without explanation still matters. A life lived outside the spotlight still shapes the future. Our choices, even when unnoticed, become part of a larger story. For the listener today, these forgotten figures invite personal reflection. What do we see ourselves? Do we assume that only dramatic acts of faith matter? Or can we recognize that steady obedience, creative work, and quiet influence are all part of God's unfolding purposes? Do we rush past the names, or do we pause to consider the humanity they represent? Reading Genesis attentively teaches us patience. It trains us to listen to what Scripture emphasizes and what it whispers. It reminds us that God's story is broad, layered, and deeply human. No life is truly forgotten, not by God. As we've walked through this passage, what truth stood out to you? How might it shape the way you live today? If this exploration helped you grow, like the video and subscribe. The journey through the pages is just beginning.